You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. And as you've probably guessed right out the gate, no, we are not live. As we mentioned on Monday's show, we weren't going to be able to be live tonight, but hopefully one or both of us are in the chat. There's a good possibility that I will be in the chat this time. I mean, I almost know that for a fact. So, I mean, unless something really crazy happens, I should totally be there right now, chatting with you guys. From an out-of-town job I'm going to be on, or that I'm on right now, I should say. Not, of course, the recording, but, of course, we didn't want to go anytime without being able to talk Star Wars with you guys. And as we usually forget to say at the beginning of the show, if you like what you see, if you want to join in some really good Star Wars discussion twice a week, every Monday and Friday, usually live, 8 o'clock Eastern time, hit that subscribe button. And if you like this video tonight, be sure to hit the like button. And hey, if you want to be a supporter, there's a link in the description. You can join the Buy Me a Coffee program that we got. Buy us a blue milk. So with that, we got some things going on. It's funny because Taika Waititi's been somewhat coming under fire lately. And it's actually getting so bad that not only are people saying, look, you know, should this guy even be doing Star Wars at this point, or whatever, that they're actually bringing up Jojo Rabbit again to try to go, no, wait, he's actually a good filmmaker and all this other stuff. But, you know, I mean, it's funny because this whole thing started when, obviously, he was working with Natalie Portman on Thor: Love and Thunder, and he basically, very seriously, looked at Natalie and said, you know, because she was basically making conversation with them, like, in between takes or whatever. And she's just like, okay, well, what's next for you? And he was talking about the Star Wars movie. And then he very seriously looks at her and says, hey, would you like to actually be in, have you ever wanted to be in a Star Wars movie? You know, to where Natalie was just kind of like, yeah, I've been in 3. You know, it's, and I mean, the thing that makes that bad is, like, I mean, she's a main character. You know, this isn't like she played you know, Mon Mothma or something. You know, I mean, even that would be pretty sad. But or she was, you know,
Yeah, I could see she was like Rose or something. Well,
yeah,
Rose ended up kind of being somewhat of a main character in a way in the sequel sequel trilogy.
or she had even been
Like if she was Admiral Ossel, like, okay, like did somebody like to that degree,
right.
like you're on a screen for like, you know, a couple of frames or something and you're out of there.
Yeah, or maybe forgetting, like, here's another good example. If you forgot that Daniel Craig played a stormtrooper, right, you know, you can maybe get away with that. You could say, well, all right. But, you know, I mean, she was basically, you know, Queen Amidala. Mother of Luke and Leia. Eventual wife of Anakin Skywalker. I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, really, man? You know, and then Love and Thunder comes out, and, you know, it's funny because I guess it really depends on where you land. Because, you know, it's funny because John Campea loves it. I mean, I thought it was okay, but I wasn't that big of a fan, honestly. I mean, it was all right, but they took all the comedy and all the stuff that really worked in Ragnarok. Because Ragnarok was actually a really good movie, and I thought that had a really good balance between some comedy, because the whole Thor character, the comedy thing kind of works, but I thought that it was, you know, it was a nice balance between the comedy and the seriousness and all this other stuff. This movie, I mean, this movie borderlines being a spoof of Marvel. That's how much they go into the comedy. I don't know if you've seen it yet or not, because we didn't really talk about it yet.
No, I haven't seen. I mean, I plan on seeing it. I mean, and the moment I started planning on seeing it, like, of course, you're starting to see everybody like talking about like, oh, this was garbage, it sucked, and blah blah. You know, I'm just kind of like, dang, like. And to be honest with you, though, I kind of, got the gist of that from the previews. Like,
Well, that's true.
This just seems like from the previews, this seems more slapsticky, almost like everything is like it's one big comedy, not. You know, I mean, I get it. You know, Taika is a comedian at heart. You know, but it didn't feel like it was. Like, first of all, for a while, I didn't even feel like he was fighting anybody because I didn't even know like who the villain was. Like until I mean, of course, Christian Bale's playing like the God something or whatever.
Butcher. Yeah, that was one of the things that actually made me interested at first because, you know, I'm trying to remember where in the comics or whatever that whole thing was. I remember hearing about that, and I remember a little bit of the storyline or whatever, and it sounded interesting. And what makes it even worse is that Christian Bale, when he's on, it's really serious, and it's actually kind of creepy, and you're kind of like, okay, I wish that maybe this had been more the tone, you know? I mean, because some of the comedy works, you know, a lot of Marvel movies have comedy in it, you know, but this thing was just drenched in it, man.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, then I think Guns N' Roses must have gotten a huge payday because there's like 4 songs of theirs in there. You know, and so what they basically did was they took some of the things that worked in Ragnarok, like when they did the Led Zeppelin tune, and a couple of other things, and it's almost like if whatever worked in Ragnarok, if it landed, let's do even more in this movie. Now, Natalie Portman was awesome. I mean, you know, pretty much everybody knows this part by now, but, you know, just in case, there might be a little bit of spoilers. And there's a reason why we're talking about Thor Ragnarok. We didn't have a stroke and think that we're a Marvel podcast or something. There's a definite reason why we're going into this, because this really is bringing up and is the crux of why everybody's really going, man, I don't know about this Star Wars thing, but we'll get to that in a sec. But basically, you know, they have the Jane Foster character. She has cancer, and, you know, they basically flash back. One of the things that does work in the movie is that they go through this whole, you know, kind of like relationship montage or something. Because actually, and I don't know how you feel about this, but the whole relationship between Jane and Thor really was kind of awkward to me.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, you know, the first movie, okay, cool, I get it, you know, but then like, okay, Dark World, all right, but then like by Ragnarok, like she wasn't even in it, I don't think.
No, she wasn't, because, and this is what was so shocking to me, because Natalie Portman had some thing against Marvel, like she was mad at them or something like that, and then she just didn't want to do any stuff, and she was really emphatic about it, actually. She did not want to do any more Marvel movies. It's like, don't even approach her. And then all of a sudden, they make this announcement for Love and Thunder, and she's going to be playing Thor. And I'm like, well, it's a little bit of a reversal, but, you know, okay. But, you know, there's certain things that definitely worked in the movie. I mean, for anybody who hasn't seen it, including you, I don't really want to spoil like every little thing about it, but the point is that there's enough missteps, and there's enough in this movie that even if you're a big fan of it, it does cause a little bit of concern when it comes to now handing a Star Wars movie over to him. Now, I will say this. On one hand, I think it might be okay only because his whole thing was going to be taking place in a completely different era, completely new characters, all this stuff. So, I mean, the worst thing that could happen is that he creates something and maybe it's a little too silly, maybe it doesn't land or whatever, but at least it's with characters of his own invention. It's just stuff that happens in the Star Wars realm, you know? Who knows? Maybe this could be the new holiday special.
Yeah, see, the thing is, first of all, okay, yes, you know, Taika did a great job in Ragnarok. This movie I have yet to see, Love and Thunder, however, doesn't seem like it's really landing with a lot of people. Now, in between that, though, he has directed some Mandalorian episodes.
That's true.
And they were great.
That is true. I can't argue with that.
And this is the problem I'm seeing with a lot of and this is, you got to kind of wonder, like, you know, in a situation where if Taika is just directing and doesn't have his hands in the scripting of it, maybe. But then we also know that Star Wars suffers from bad writing problems too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of hard to kind of really figure out, like, you know, what is if he does this, and let's just say it flops or it's just not a good movie, it's going to be kind of hard to where to place the blame. I mean, because if it's all on him, then that's easy. Like if he wrote and directed the film, then it's like,
which is the plan. That is the plan, and that's where the concern's coming from. Look, if he were just directing this, I'd be like, whatever. I mean, if Favreau or Filoni or one of those guys were writing it, I'd say fine. Because as you pointed out, you know, he does a good job. And then what he adds to somebody else's creation isn't bad. In fact, sometimes it might even be good. Because if you sprinkle a little bit of the comedy and some of the stuff that he puts in there, it's fine. But, you know, he wrote this and he directed it, and if he does that, I don't know.
Yeah. And that is the concern. And so the problem is like, how many hits to the shields can Star Wars take? You know what I mean? Like it feels kind of like episode 8, where, you know, Last Jedi, where they're chasing, you know, just out of the reach of the guns, but they keep, you know, hitting them with the you know, hitting them, and it's like, okay, eventually their shields are going to break down. They're not going to be able to take too much bombardment after a while, and then they'll be sitting ducks. And that's how I feel like where Star Wars is right now, because in some ways it's like, okay, you have some shows that are great, some shows that are not, or some movies that are good, some not so much. And so it's this whole vacillating thing where fans really don't know. It's like, okay, we used to all be excited for Star Wars, and now you kind of have this weird version of anxiety. Just like, I'm hoping I'm paying to see a good movie, you know, or a good TV show, for example. You know, because it's like, all right, Mandalorian, super awesome. No one has really any complaints really about the show. Most fans love it. Then you go Book of Boba Fett. Now people are like, oh no. Obi-Wan, now it's half and half. You know what I mean? And you got more people. Well, I won't say half and half. I think you had more people who liked Obi-Wan than didn't. But you see what I'm saying? Like, but that's the point. Like, we're in. Like, there's no consistency of quality. There's no real quality control when it comes to Star Wars, and I think that's the biggest thing. And you know, you bring in someone in like Taika Waititi. You know, yeah, he's a great director. Yeah, he's done some cool stuff. But it's like even he is starting to vacillate once again, you know. And it's just, you know, I mean, I get it. Like, every film that you're gonna come out with isn't gonna be a blockbuster. Every film that you're gonna direct, even Spielberg, I mean, like, okay, yeah, I mean, some movies are more iconic or better than others, but the thing is, with a Spielberg film, you could pretty much guarantee it's going to be a good film, though.
Yeah, I mean, there's gonna be a base, you know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a base level of stuff, and that's where I'm going with this, is that, like, all right, with Spielberg, you get at least, all right, B quality, let's just say, film. May not be like an A+, like, Jurassic Park or, E.T. or something like that, but, it's still a solid, good film that people can say, okay, I was happy. It was time well spent. But you don't want your franchise, once again, with Star Wars, where people just be like, oh, this again. And now people want to walk out, and now everybody's running to the internet now and saying like, oh yeah, this is stupid and sucks. It doesn't make any sense. And, and that's the thing, like, even if he's directing his own thing and he's creating it, it still has to feel like Star Wars. It still has to have the Star Wars energy, the vibe, the tone. Yes, Star Wars has comedy, but it has to have its own type of comedy, and it can't be too much. Like, that's kind of the problem they were having with Solo at first with Lord and Miller. That was the issue.
Yeah, that's actually what it reminded me of. I was sitting there thinking, watching Love and Thunder, going, wow, if he does Star Wars now, it could almost be like what Lord and Miller were planning on doing. And again, I mean, some of Lord and Miller's stuff did make it into the final film. And I don't exactly remember what it was, but I don't remember it being terrible. But yeah, and I mean, again, there's a couple of ways that you can look at it. On one hand, yeah, you could say, well, look, okay, not knowing or remembering that Natalie Portman was in Star Wars is kind of a big deal. But the good news is at least he's not doing, like an Obi-Wan movie or something. You know what I mean? It's like he's not messing with the characters that we know and love if he does something completely new. But see, this is where it goes into your point, where it's kind of like, yeah, but even if he creates a completely new thing within the Star Wars universe, it still has to feel like Star Wars. It still has to. And I'll tell you my other big concern. If there had been maybe 2 or 3 movies that have come down, and okay, now Taika takes a shot at it, and maybe that's what he does, maybe I would still have the same concerns, but it wouldn't be so dire if it weren't for the fact that it's starting to look like the next Star Wars movie could be his.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you said, after The Rise of Skywalker, after the sequel trilogy that really kind of started the whole toxicity, it's kind of like, okay, they need a good, successful, classic Star Wars film.
Yeah, because the thing is that, added onto your point, okay, so we had the sequel trilogy, which, most deem to be abysmal.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking of the
Palpatine
Emperor, a little.
Yeah. But, okay, but then we have this other, I forget her name, slips my director of Wonder Woman 1984.
Oh, Patty Jenkins.
Patty Jenkins, thank you. So she was supposed to be the next film up.
And
Rogue
then Squadron.
That got Rogue Squadron. So then that got scrapped, and then now it's like supposed to be Taika's thing, and then it's like, okay, well, he directs a bad movie that most people who really wanted to come see a really good Thor movie. Well, that got kind of tanked, and then no one knows what Rian Johnson is doing in his whole little trilogy, but people still mad at him from The Last Jedi. So it's just kind of like right now, if you really look at the scope of Star Wars in the film side of things, it's really looking bleak, over there.
Yeah, I know.
It's like,
this is why I think, well, what they should do is maybe make Kevin Feige the next one.
Well, honestly, what I would love is to let Favreau and Filoni just do a movie. Honestly, just let them, because like I said, they haven't really missed. So I would rather go with somebody who I know who can kind of at least establish some sort of bar or precedent. It's like, okay, let them do one or two movies and then get the fans back into it. Like, okay. And then that way you can filter out like, okay, who's really gonna, and man, heck, give Colin another shot. Like he never got a chance to really do his Star Wars movie.
Yeah,
so,
but you know, with the diminishing Jurassic Park series, I'm kind of happy that's the case. Again, I didn't hate the latest
Dominion, one. Yeah, Dominion, I heard it didn't do that well.
Well, the problem is that, you know, they're shoehorning the old cast, they're forcing them to meet the new cast, and the story actually was good. The story was good. It was another execution, not so much, you know? I mean, first of all, it probably should have been a little bit longer. And there are just too many coincidental things, but there were good things about it, though. And the story was actually cool. Like, it could have, even with the new characters, because the classic characters, I thought that the way that they were starting to bring them in would have worked, but it was just done so quickly and so coincidentally. I mean, you want to talk about having to suspend disbelief, and then they're trying to do this whole, like, dinosaurs are having to coexist with humans, which, again, that was more or less, you know, there's only so many times you can put this thing on an island. I mean, eventually these dinosaurs are going to escape and go into the rest of the world. So, I mean, there were elements. It's no different than Love and Thunder. There were elements that were actually cool. It's just, overall, they messed it up. And it's starting to make you wonder, can these people actually, are they capable of making a good movie anymore? You know, when you actually look at classic movies versus movies now, you know, there is a diminishing in quality. At least over the last 5 to 10 years, even though there's a lot of movies that have been amazing. But I'm talking about, like, overall. I'm not, you know, there were some...
Well, the problem I'm seeing with a lot of films, and this even goes to, like, and I'll use a big, you know, franchise as an example. So the Fast and Furious, right? So when they started off, like when you watch the first movie, you know, it's kind of like, all right, you know, it's grounded in reality, you know, and it's like, okay, and it was a really good story. Fast forward, you know, you got you know, driving out of airplanes and landing on mountaintops, and I mean, it's like, it's cool, it's fun, it's fast. I mean, it's a cool action thing, but it kind of got away from what it seemingly was trying to do to begin with. Well, and then everything, and I think everybody's trying to top something, like, okay, well, we did this, now we gotta, how much, we need more pyro, we need more explosion, we need, what wow factor can we give them? Oh, well, let's do Fast and Furious in space. Like, okay, you see what I'm saying? Like, I think a lot of people are trying to do too much, and it's just, make a good movie, just tell a good story. Like, everything doesn't have to be at a big, you know, and I think that's the thing, that everybody's looking for the big explosion. What's the big pop? What's the big thing? And it's just like, if you tell a good story, it should be there.
But as you pointed out, though, like you pointed out, the Fast and Furious didn't even start that way. It's like everybody's looking for the big explosion, big pop. I get it, but I mean, the original Fast and Furious essentially was a crime drama. You know, and the second one sort of played into that too. The third one is where things, I mean, it was still grounded, but you could see the beginnings of it. Like, that was sort of the gateway, you know. And what was funny about the third one is I think only Han was the only actual main character. I think it was like a whole different cast or whatever with Tokyo Drift. And then, of course, you know, once they started to get to 4, and this is another thing, too, is that with some of these franchises, not everyone, but with some of them, the Fast and Furious, obviously it's morphed into now they're like the Mission Impossible movies or something. You know, and now they're part of the government. And I mean, they used to be like these hijacker guys that were out in the fringe, and now they're almost another government division where like the CIA is coming to them for missions or something. It's like, whoa, okay, guys.
Exactly. These military trained people can't take down this guy, but a bunch of street racers can, magically get it done. And another one of our favorite franchises, right? Nightmare on Elm Street. Once again, started off very like Freddy Krueger was very creepy. He would come visit you in your dreams, and he was just a really, really freaky, creepy looking guy. You had the whole 1, 2, like this. Everything was very ominous. Everything was very just kind of like, all right. And it was a brilliant thing because everybody has to sleep, right? So, all right, great concept. And then they started slowly getting away from that. And they started having Freddy Krueger, like now you're in this video game, it's ha ha ha. And it's like this whole comedy thing. And it's like, this is not what Nightmare on Elm Street was supposed to be until they started doing like what the new Nightmare, which actually kind of returned it back
brought it back in a very clever way.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, there we go. It felt like a Nightmare on Elm Street movie now. And that's the same thing with Star Wars. It's like, I don't want to happen. I don't want them to start trying to Marvelize stuff or start trying to, compete with all these other franchises for trying to get this. How over the top can we go with this, and how much can we push these characters? And it's like, no, like serve the franchise. Just really serve the franchise and really just deliver. Like I said, the Mandalorian delivered. It served the franchise. It really gave you a compelling story. It gave you good characters. You had cool dialogue. You had some comedy, of course, with once you introduce Grogu and do the magic hands, and I'm like, stuff like that was like, okay, that's funny. It's it's just like, okay,
man, yeah, that was awesome. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, but it's just like, because it's like, all right,
so it's still cracking me up, man.
And it makes sense because but see, that joke is well placed because of like, okay, where we are in time. It's like, okay, people haven't seen Jedi except for Luke Skywalker, and people just only heard about him, and he's the only one. So now, the Force is definitely by that point a mystery to people. So you seeing this little baby, doing stuff, it's like, okay, well maybe that's.
But here's the other thing too, right? It's not all these jokes that are just, like you said, the slapstick, hilarious things. They're basically situational and circumstantial comedy jokes, to where it's something that somebody might say if they were really in that situation. And it's more organic.
Yeah,
which is a word that's been overused everywhere, really. But I mean, especially in entertainment and film, but music. But I mean, it's true though. I mean, it's a really good descriptive thing. It's a lot more of a natural thing. That's why in some ways it's a bit controversial, but not really. Where sometimes I think that Lucas should actually do a Star Wars film and kind of reset everything in a way. Not reboot as in throw away any canon, but just kind of, okay, let him reestablish the very franchise he created with maybe a new story or something like that, that now everybody could use as a foundation and build on from there.
Yeah, but that's why I said, like, I mean, and as much as I love and respect George.
Well, not direct, like I say, maybe, but,
Well, no, I know what you meant. And well, for me, and, and I can say, like, just write the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, like I said, I feel like that's what I said, Filoni, I just really wonder, like, okay, with him being over... what was his position? I forgot.
Creative director.
Creative director. So it's like, okay. See, I think he should just be kind of over all. I don't know how that it breaks down, but to me, it just seems like it should be over all at least the films, TV shows, stuff like that. Like, and he just needs to rein everybody in and just like, no, this is crap. Go back, redo it, because it's the integrity of Star Wars is what we come for. It's and I think that's really what we as fans are that's the expectation. There's a certain expectation of quality that we want in our Star Wars, and when we're not getting it, is it's going to cause, like I said, more division into the fan base, and it's going to be harder and harder to get folks back because now it's all over the place.
Well, and it kind of goes. It goes to what you're saying, though, right? Because it's tell a good story and all this other stuff. I think the biggest problem that's happened is that being that Star Wars is this bankable business model, they are trying to make a successful Star Wars movie, not a good one. And I think that that's the problem, is they're trying too hard. They don't realize that the reason why all the original Star Wars movies that Lucas made were good was he just did things the way he wanted to do them. He told good stories. He, even when you complain about the prequels and the execution, and that's finding new fans, actually. Because people are going back and people are saying, the execution is still bad. Doesn't matter how much time has passed. But what's happening is people are overlooking that and they're going, oh, wow, these stories are actually better than I remembered they were.
Yeah. And to your point, once again, you touched on this saying, like, what George, it's not so much that George did what he wanted to. I mean, yes, he did, but what he modeled was successful stuff.
Yeah.
Like things that are successful, and he understood why they were successful.
Well, because they're classic and timeless.
Exactly. And that's the whole point of it all, is that successful, timeless, good story tropes will always win. Bruce Lee said it best: simplicity is the key to brilliance, right? You don't need to do, and it's something you even taught me, like when I was a kid, about, oh, look, I can use all these different type of whites. But it's like, do you see any of that on TV? It's cuts and dissolves, and that's it. Like,
ironically, unless you're watching Star Wars.
Yes.
But
and that's what I'm saying. It's one of those things like, just stick to the basics. You don't need to do all this extra stuff and just to try to get a reaction out of people. People are going to react to something good anyway. Like, good meat makes its own gravy. It's one of those things that's like, if you just tell a good story, people will love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and again, I think the problem is that since Disney took over Lucasfilm, they're chasing monetary success, and they're just trying to replicate what came before in a way, but it's missing the heart. That's the problem. That is the sequel trilogy. I mean, from a cinematography point of view, from a filmmaking point of view, I mean, they're good movies, but they just don't have the heart that the prequels and the original trilogy had. They have moments, but they don't have that timeless quality, because there's a lot of things that they try to put in there that reflect the modern time period. And that was the biggest mistake they could have made. I mean, sure, Lucas had some allegory, for fascism from the Nazi thing, but that's a timeless thing. Nazis hardly invented fascism. You had some allegories for the Vietnam War with the Ewok battle and stuff, but again, it was more of a timeless thing. It was, a primitive society versus a technological one. It wasn't necessarily a direct allegory for something to where generations, would go, oh, I know what they're trying to do, in the future. So, I mean, the problem is as soon as you put timestamps on your art, it's going to date it. And that's the biggest issue. They're trying to put all this SJW stuff in and, all this other stuff and everything like that. And all they're doing is they're going to pretty much trap Star Wars into a particular time period. And that's just a dangerous thing to do. And on top of that, they're trying to chase success, which is also bad. Because again, and this is something that you and I have talked about a lot, right? Is that, so with something like the Fast and Furious or something like that, I mean, unless you just want to do the latest adventure of, and they're retreading the same ground. I mean, a lot of these franchises that have gone on for a while really they're kind of past their expiration date in a way. How many times have we heard the Saw movies? You probably should have stopped after 3.
Yeah.
Thing was like a perfect trilogy, and if they had stopped after 3, the Saw franchise would have been looked at very differently from the way it's looked at now. And don't get me wrong, they've actually had good movies here and there beyond 3, but it's kind of past its expiration date in that sense. You got to know when to say, okay, yes, we had a little bit of a franchise going, but this is where we need to put a bow on it and wrap it up. But you don't have to do that with Star Wars, as the novels have proven, right? Look at all these Star Wars books that have come out since 1991, and how many great stories they managed to wring out of that, because this universe is so vast, so huge. You can constantly create brand new characters within the universe, just the context of the universe.
If you understand what Star Wars is.
Well, yes.
And that's the thing, you have to understand it. And yeah, I completely agree with you. People keep going back to the well because they know, okay, it brings certain things back for people. It's like, okay, yeah, let's do another Karate Kid movie because with like Jaden Smith or whatever, because let's reboot that, or let's just do that. It's like, no, see, Cobra Kai was better because Cobra Kai actually took the characters, people who actually understood what the Karate Kid was really truly about, and you incorporated, those people like Ralph Macchio and, William Zabka and everything like that. And so you bring these people back and they're actually you're furthering the story, and they're furthering it, in a very clever, even though it's up to date, it's still a very clever way. It's no different. It still has the same heart, like you said, as it did in 1980, four or something when it came out. So what I mean, and you don't have a Miyagi, like you don't, and everybody's like, oh, it's not going to be the same. Like you don't have Miyagi there, but it still has the same heart, because once again, these people know their characters and they know what this whole thing was really about, and they're not doing things just to, like you said, shoehorn people in. Like, okay, we bring back Chosen, we bring back this person in this way, so that's what it's really about. And when it comes to Taika Waititi, it's like, I don't know if he's going to really truly embrace that, or because everybody wants to talk like, oh, I want to take Star Wars in a different direction.
Right.
What does that mean, though?
Exactly.
Like, you really have to ask that question.
What does that really mean?
What does that mean? You know what I mean? It's like, okay, when you say a different direction, are you just trying to take what was there and you're keeping the heart of it, and you're just taking it in a new direction with new characters and, create new things? Or are you trying to like almost reinvent Star Wars?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's what everybody's trying to do, is like, well, what if Star Wars would have, been this? And, you start throwing a bunch of goofy stuff in there.
Well, and they'll start to say things like, well, what I want to do is, what would Star Wars be like if it were written today? Through the lens of the modern eye, all these other weird buzz terms they come out with and stuff like that. Right. Like reinvented. I mean, and again, I get it to a certain degree, right? Because there have been some artsy experimenting with, say, Romeo and Juliet. Remember the Leonardo DiCaprio version of that movie? And they basically took the story of Romeo and Juliet with the same exact dialogue, but put it in a modern type of a situation. Time. Yeah. You
Which
know,
I hate it.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, and I admit it was, and again, from like a film critic perspective almost, I could respect what they were doing, and I think they pulled it off. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I've seen it maybe twice, mostly I think once all the way through. But it was one of those things that didn't appeal to me. And again, this is one of those things that you got to be careful about, and you have to ask yourself, is this the right director to move Star Wars where it needs to go? Or are you giving this stuff, these guys, jobs because you like them and you like what they've done with other stuff?
Right.
Now, granted, that's not a terrible reason either. You know, maybe there's a particular, you know, style maybe a director or somebody has, and you're kind of like, wow, I wonder what they would do with Star Wars. And even if they were to put their own stamp on it, you know, like I'm not in, well, okay. Let's just say, because this almost happened with Star Trek. Here comes your Star Trek reference that, you know, it's mandatory for all of our shows, right? So take Quentin Tarantino.
Other series.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Quentin Tarantino was actually approached to direct a film for two different franchises. The Star Trek one was very close to happening. And the problem was, you know, he wanted to kind of turn it into a Tarantino film. He wanted to make it really violent and, you know, like this whole R-rated thing and stuff, you know? And it's like, it doesn't really belong in Star Trek, though. Now, one of the things that I thought might have worked, he was approached to actually do Halloween 6. And I forgot what he was saying, but his version of Halloween 6 actually sounded kind of cool. So you have to be careful because you can have some hotshot in director, somebody, and not even just because they're popular, but maybe they have a genuine style that's really cool and is just artistically amazing. But you have to look, does that actually fit into this particular franchise? You know, maybe that would work with another one, but does it work with this one? And this is the same thing with Taika Waititi. It's like, well, does it work with Star Wars? Even if you loved Love and Thunder and, you know, you loved Ragnarok, it's kind of like, well, okay, you could say that it worked in Marvel, but does it work in Star Wars? And unfortunately, I don't know. I guess we would have to hear what his ideas were and where he wants to go, which, of course, I don't think will ever happen. We'll know what his ideas were when, you know, you see that opening logo on the screen.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those moments where, like you said, you know, just because you did this successfully, that doesn't always mean it translates for you to being over here. And once again, it's hard to really adapt someone else's mind or vision. You know, like for example, we talk about the Bond series, right? The James Bond series. Now that's gone through, you know, the Broccoli family. They're kind of been the ones who's been kind of, you know,
the keepers of the franchise, basically.
Yeah, and so I think they've done a pretty good job of maintaining the integrity of that particular franchise. But, you know, there have been some bad Bond movies, though. You know, there's been some Bond movies that's like, wasn't as good. Quantum of Solace wasn't all that great. And then what was the other one? Spectre.
Yeah.
You know,
Spectre was kind of weak.
Spectre was kind of weak, yeah. But, you know, This last one though was amazing. I mean, it was so it's that took Bond in a different direction where it was like it was more emotional than we've ever seen it before. And I was just like, okay.
Well, see, to
wow.
me, No Time to Die was a worthy follow-up to Skyfall.
Yeah.
Because of the Daniel Craig version, I was kind of like, okay, and I still feel this way too, is that Skyfall is kind of like the pinnacle of his Bond films.
Mm-hmm.
And yet No Time to Die is a much more worthy follow-up to that than Spectre was.
I agree. Yeah, and so when you start looking at directors, you know, you to have the essence, like you said, of a Bond. Like you have to know what James Bond is, who he is, understand the psychology of it. But it's like it was all there were a series of books that were written, you know what I mean? And so by a person, and so you have a chance to really get into it. But I think a lot of people have time just adapting what someone created, you know, and that's kind of hard, you know, when you could create your own stuff, like, you know, George Lucas did, you know, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, you know, because these are out of his mind. This is just stuff that he kind of created and, you know, ran with it. But getting someone else to really see your vision,
But again,
it's very
in
complicated
Lucas,
a lot of times.
Yeah, and especially with Empire and Return of the Jedi. Now it was coming out of his mind, but then he let directors in to then further guide that, right? So he wasn't solely responsible for some of this stuff. And naturally, you know, the great illustrator Ralph McQuarrie, he's responsible for a lot of the classic designs. So Star Wars, I mean, we do give credit to Lucas, and he deserves that. But sometimes people, I think, in crediting Lucas, forget that Star Wars is very much a team sport. You know, there were a lot of other people that were extremely involved and also just absolutely responsible for certain elements of what made Star Wars great that were not Lucas, you know, so...
Sure, like Irvin Kershner, yeah.
And, you know, some of the other guys in there too, right? But just like some of the designers that came up with various things, and, you know, it wasn't like...
ILM.
Yeah, well, I mean, even, Ben Burt, the sound designer, he's the one that came up with Vader's breathing thing. He's the one that came up with the lightsaber sound. He, you know, that stuff was out of him experimenting, and, you know, Lucas had final approval, and that's where Lucas actually gets a lot of the credit to me, is the fact that Lucas knew what was good and what was bad, what worked and what didn't, what should be in, what should be out. But then everybody forgets that it was his first wife that was the one that saved Star Wars. If it had actually been released the way Lucas wanted to, it would have been terrible. But she went in and edited the thing and made it what it was. So there's a lot of people that had a lot to do with that. And so what I think would have been the smartest move for Disney to do in the first batch of movies, namely the sequel trilogy and maybe the standalones too, they should have made Lucas a consultant, like an active consultant, staffed, you know.
Yeah, he's got the shirt.
Right, not just some ceremonial position or whatever it is, like an actual...
We'll just invite him to the set.
Right, yeah, exactly. Hey, George, what do you think of this? Or whatever, you know, or maybe invite him to the premiere and hope he liked it. I mean, he should have been made a consultant to where he had some power to guide the process. Because I think it would have been important for us to have that bridge, that sort of passing of the torch, so to speak, you know? I mean, I think that would have been a much smarter move, but they didn't do that. But they have a chance to do that now that the Skywalker saga is done. And it's not even so much that there aren't people that can interpret it, because, and this is something, and I know making a movie is a totally different thing, but I'm just talking about from a story perspective. And sometimes I'll contradict myself with this, because I'll say that there are certain things that were actually really good on paper, but then once you start shooting and all that, you can ruin it too, right? You can actually, we said that with Duel of the Fates. You know, we looked at the Colin Trevorrow version of episode 9 and said, oh, well, this is what they should have made. This thing's awesome. Well, yeah, it's awesome on a script, but maybe if they had actually shot it, we would have been like, oh, this is terrible. They should have let J.J. Abrams finish it. So, but that being said, how is it that, like, the 30 plus authors that have written Star Wars books all could tell all these wonderful stories with these amazing visuals in your head, and yet it just seems like they can't, none of these admittedly talented filmmakers in their own right can get it right. And a lot of it comes down to, I think, like you said, they need somebody to kind of smooth it in, you know, kind of be the KY of the whole thing. Because, you know, with Knives Out, right? Rian Johnson, that was an amazing movie because he wrote it. It's his creation.
Yeah, I just think that, you know, like I said, I think it just goes back to people trying to reinvent the wheel. Everybody's trying to top George or top what has already been established, and it's just like, just continue it. That's all we're asking is continue. We're not trying to retop, you know, stop trying to top Empire, stop trying to top Return of the Jedi or New Hope. Like, stop, just let it be. But just tell and I think that's where when you talk about the writers of these authors, I should say, who are coming out with these books, is that all they're doing is they're continuing the story of, okay, what's likely, what's plausible, like what would make the most sense. Like Claudia Gray with Bloodline. Okay, what would happen in a world where, okay, now that they're, you know, the Emperor's gone, Vader's gone, okay, but people found out that Leia is his kid.
Right. What happens if when people find out that that's Leia's, you know, which is funny because in the old expanded universe, in Heir to the Empire, everybody knew that. In fact, you even had that, what was that group of people? I'm sure somebody will chat this in tonight, but it was a particular group that sort of acted as bodyguards to Leia. And they did so because they were almost like Vader worshippers in a sense. And they called her Lady Vader, you know, because she was his daughter. And they kind of swore to protect her and all this other stuff. So they kind of acknowledged it. But what Claudia Gray did was in the new canon, she was kind of like, okay, well, but really, what would be more realistic? You know, because if you think about it, it's kind of like, what if the person that was running Germany after Hitler was Hitler's daughter? You know, I mean, how would people feel about that? And that's sort of what happened here, right? I mean, Vader and the Emperor fall, and then Leia is kind of, along with Mon Mothma and a couple others, like basically the face and the authority of the New Republic. And it's like, wait, hold it, you're Vader's daughter? Yeah, we might have to rethink this.
Exactly. You know, and it's one of those things that creates it could create a lot of drama, which it did, and it creates a lot of interesting storytelling, which it did. It created a lot of different things, and you know, I think that's what made it good. Rogue One, for example, you know, like the story, like, okay, we're going to tell the story of how they got the plans for the Death Star, but you know, there's not one Jedi shown in the whole stupid thing. I mean, you had a Sith, but not a Jedi. So, and but it was very compelling stories. It's like, okay, well, how do we get the plans? You know, what's happened? Like, how are people responding to this government, that's taking over? And it's like, all right, well, how are we going to stop some big thing like this? You know, we're just this ragtag group, and you know, like, it created the emotion, it created the drama, it created. I mean, we all knew what was going to happen because obviously, you know, A New Hope. But so when you already have the answer, you have to make the situations so compelling that the answer doesn't even matter, because you're so involved in the process of how they're going to get this to happen.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I think is just so important with this whole thing, and why you have to be careful, not to almost become the new version of Oprah, where you get a Star Wars film and you get a Star Wars, it's like all your friends all of a sudden that are directors, it's like, hey, go ahead and direct a Star Wars movie or whatever. I mean, people have to have that same, it's not even enough just to be a fan. You have to understand it. If you're going to play in this sandbox, you got to follow the rules of the sandbox. Otherwise, go find your own sandbox. And
exactly.
Sometimes I think people mistakenly think that that's halting progress, or, Star Wars will get stagnant because it'll be stuck in this one place. And it's not. You can go anywhere with it. You just have to adhere to the things that make it what Star Wars is. Not to mention the fact, it's funny, people are like, well, it could get stuck or stagnant. I'm like, if it's timeless, then it's timeless. Right. A lot of the stories that have been timeless haven't been stuck in anything.
Nope.
I mean, they have recurring themes, things that every generation can relate to, and things like that's what makes it timeless. The minute that you try to ignore some of that and then, try to move something forward, or, some of these other buzz things that they use, kind of like you said, let's
always trying to be progressive,
or reinvent Star Wars for a new generation, or any of this other stupid stuff. It's like, no, you don't need to, because it's for every generation.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I just hope that if I hope that if Taika's ideas are a little bit too out there or stupid, that they just say, maybe let's agree to disagree and we're not going to use you at all. I hope they do that. If not, if they actually give him the film and say, yeah, okay, go ahead, it's cool, then I really hope that, and it's possible, because like you said, he did direct really good episodes of The Mandalorian. And he may have written those. I'm not 100% sure, but he may have. Because most of it's been written by Filoni and Favreau. And then they would just take the directors in or whatever. But I think during the gallery or something, they were talking about how if he didn't write the episode, he wrote scenes, or he added stuff, or he did whatever. And so if he could just do what he did with The Mandalorian to a movie, then I'd be fully on board. What about you? What do you think? What are your closing thoughts on this?
Yeah, I will say the same. Like, I think as long as there just needs to be good oversight, and that's got to come from Favreau and Filoni. Like, it can't be Kathleen, because what the heck does she know, honestly, about writing stories?
Well, and not to mention the fact that it's like, don't let her. Well, that's true, but I mean, the other thing is, don't let him finish 80% of the film and then fire him and then do a bunch of reshoots, patch it together, and send it out. That's her way of oversight.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Like, it needs to start in the writing room. Let's get the minds together. Let's get, people who really understand Star Wars. Like I said, Favreau, Filoni, even this new group of people who come up with the High Republic, those story, they'll get the people who really understand the stuff, and then flush the stuff out. I'll even get a bunch of Star Wars fans, like hardcore Star Wars fans, and even run it past some of them. Like, almost like a little
like a control group or something like that.
Yeah, like focus group.
Yeah.
And just see, like, okay, well, here's what we're kind of planning. You don't have to give them all the specs, but it's like, all right, this is the direction. How does this sound? It's like, well, all right.
Well, the only danger of that, though, is that, I mean, the problem is, and this happens to any aging franchise, is the fact that now you've got all different kinds of fans now. For a long time, all the fans were running in parallel, right? I mean, there were certain elements that they liked or didn't like, but for the most part, Star Wars fans were a united bunch that essentially liked the same stuff, disliked the same stuff. They came from a single generation. As it got older, even though Star Wars appeals to multiple generations are getting different things out of it and want different things from it. So if you were going to do the whole focus group thing, you'd have to get like a cross section.
Well, I will honestly, I mean, to me, the best, the best group, honestly, would be our group, honestly, like between your era and mine. Because, and I'm not just saying it because we're here. But...
yes, because like, imagine that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that like you were you're old enough to remember, okay, when this thing first started, number one. So you were there from its inception. So you know what Star Wars is. For me, it's like, okay, I was like right after you all. So I kind of inherited it. And then I was there for of course, the prequels and, everything else that followed it. But I still remember like how it should be. And I think that group can actually really should be the one. Honestly, they should be the ones pushing it because it's for us, really. If you really think about it. I would just say,
look, we're two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars.
All things Star
Wars. Just bring us in there. We'll use our tagline on them. They'll be like, yes, right. That makes perfect sense. Come on in, guys. Let's talk about this. In fact, if they really wanted to do it, well, I mean, if they wanted to make it a win-win for everybody, they would just come on this show and we would all debate it, and then anybody that wanted to watch could chat in, right? And then give their thoughts. And then there you go. You just use that as kind of a cross-section. But yeah, I mean, I agree that if they just... And they could even just have, say 2 members from each age group or something. And then, of course, you'll have to do the male-female demographic too, because women tend to respond to different things about Star Wars than the guys do. Mm-hmm. But all that said, if you do go the focus group route, that's what you would have to do.
Yep.
All right.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, obviously, we're going to continue to follow this. It's not like we're a news channel per se, so I'm not going to sit there and say we're going to keep you updated on it. Although, when we know, you'll know. Because, we're like you guys, right? We're fans. News comes through. We're not the ones breaking it, but you can bet we'll be the ones discussing it when it comes up.
Yes. And we don't make the news, we just report it.
Exactly. So, if that's something that you guys are into, again, support us by hitting that like button if you've enjoyed this video. Subscribe to our channel. You'll see more videos like this. Like I said, we're usually live every Monday and Friday night at 8 o'clock. And if we're not, then much like tonight, we have a pre-recorded episode that still premieres. You could still chat live. It could still kind of feel like our live experience. And then, of course, if you are watching, in this case, after the premiere or usually after our live show, you could keep the conversation going in the comments section. But hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, subscribe to the channel if you are so inclined. Click the link below, buy us a blue milk. There's a couple of different tiers where you could support us monthly, or, hey, maybe you just want to make a one-time donation. Got some extra money laying around, you're like, hey, these guys are cool, I want to support them and help their channel grow. Any donations appreciated. But Monday, we even, weird thing, we've been kind of knocking it out of the park lately. We actually know what we're talking about. Except I kind of forgot. See, this is the problem when I do these big build-ups, right? I completely forget. Mm-hmm. Oh, it was the Mandalorian. That's what it was. All right. So yes. On Monday's show, one of the things that has broken within the last few days is they've leaked the Mandalorian Season 3 trailer or something like that. But I suspect it's what was shown at Star Wars Celebration, maybe. I'm surprised it's starting to make its rounds now. If you guys are still watching the chat, you can chat this in or in the comment section. Correct us if we're wrong. But I'm pretty sure that's where the trailer came from, which seems a little weird to me because it's just making the rounds. But, we were going to do it tonight, but it's like, you know what? Maybe a better quality version will come along because it's kind of weird. But our plan is we're going to react to it, and then we're going to discuss it as best we can, given that there's not... I mean, it's kind of weird to watch it, actually. It's kind of like those old bootleg movies, where somebody's just shooting the movie screen. So we're going to do our best. But there's some exciting things going on with The Mandalorian Season 3. They are really upping the game, and we're going to talk about all that and probably live reaction to the trailer as well. Not 100% sold on that yet, but more than likely that's what's going to happen. But at the very least, we're definitely going to be discussing all that's been revealed in this trailer, the basic tone of the show and everything else. So you're not going to want to miss that. That's going to be Monday night at 8. So until then, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.